The courtroom was filled with anticipation, the air thick with tension as Jalen Carter stood before the judge. He was only 19, but he had learned more in the past few weeks about the legal system than most people did in years. The case had started simple enough. His cousin Jamal had been arrested under questionable circumstances. But what was supposed to be an open and shut case had quickly turned into a battle for justice. Jalen had no law degree. He wasn't a lawyer. But when Jamal had been wronged, Jalen had made a decision. He wasn't going to sit back and watch the system steamroll over his cousin. Jamal deserved better. Jalen adjusted his jacket, glancing at the prosecution's table. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a sharp suit and an even sharper glare, was already preparing his arguments. The case was supposed to be a straightforward assault on Jamal's character, but Jalen wasn't about to let that happen. He stepped forward, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. Your Honor, we're here today because of a fundamental failure in this case. The charges against my cousin are built on assumptions, not facts. Judge Whitaker, an older man with years of experience in the courtroom, didn't flinch. He peered down at Jalen over his glasses, his face stern but unreadable. Mr. Carter, you are representing your cousin. But I'll remind you that this is not a place for amateur theatrics. This is a court of law. Jalen took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling in. This wasn't about theatrics. This was about truth. I understand, Your Honor. But facts speak for themselves, Jalen said, his voice calm but unwavering. The officers involved in my cousin's arrest acted without justification. The evidence they gathered was tainted, and there's no reason my cousin should be facing these charges. Whitaker raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. You're telling me that the officers, who have years of experience, made a mistake? Jalen didn't back down. I'm telling you, Your Honor, that this case was handled poorly from the start. There was no cause for the stop, no reasonable suspicion, and they didn't follow proper procedures when they searched my cousin's vehicle. That's not a mistake. That's a violation. The prosecutor shifted in his seat, clearly displeased with Jalen's approach. Your Honor, the defendant's argument is based on speculation, not evidence. We have the officer's statements. We have the search report. We have witnesses. These claims are baseless. Jalen wasn't fazed. I've reviewed everything. The statements are inconsistent. The report doesn't match the body cam footage. There's no credible evidence linking my cousin to any illegal activity. And yet, here we are. The courtroom was silent now. The judge looked down at the case file in front of him, his expression unreadable. The prosecutor cleared his throat, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Whitaker finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. Mr. Carter, you're making a bold claim. But claims are not enough. You'll need to show this court that your cousin is innocent, not just claim that he is. Jalen felt the eyes of the entire courtroom on him. He knew this was just the beginning. He wasn't about to let the system sweep his cousin's case under the rug. He had to be sharp. He had to be precise. And most of all, he had to be right. Your Honor, I'm not here to make bold claims. I'm here to make a case, Jalen said, his voice firm. I'm going to show you that my cousin is not guilty. I'm going to show you that this case is built on a flawed foundation, and I'm going to prove it. The judge didn't respond immediately. He looked down at the papers in front of him, clearly considering his next move. But Jalen could see it in his eyes. The judge was waiting for him to make a mistake. He was waiting for Jalen to falter. But Jalen wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Not today. The courtroom was stunned into silence. Jalen Carter, barely out of college, no law license, no official title, was now standing behind the defense table like he belonged there. His cousin Jamal watched him with a mix of hope and disbelief, while Judge Whitaker looked like a cat watching a mouse that thought it could roar. Whitaker leaned back in his chair, amused. His voice rang out with theatrical sarcasm. Well then, let's give the preacher boy his shot. Court will allow it. The bailiff raised an eyebrow. The clerk whispered something under her breath. A couple of people in a gallery stifled laughs, expecting a train wreck. This was a show now, and everyone thought they already knew how it would end. Everyone except Jalen. He didn't smile, didn't flinch. He opened the worn leather binder he'd been carrying, flipped past the handwritten notes and police reports he printed at home, and stepped forward. Your Honor, he said, voice calm but firm, before we proceed, I'd like to file a motion to dismiss all charges based on unlawful search and lack of admissible evidence. Whitaker raised an eyebrow. You got a legal basis for that, Mr. Carter? Or are we playing make-believe? Jalen didn't blink. The arresting officers conducted a vehicle search without a warrant, without probable cause, and without consent. The body cam footage confirms that. I've included timestamps and the transcript. He handed a document to the bailiff, who passed it up to the bench. The judge's smirk twitched just slightly as he scanned the paper. A flicker of surprise flashed in his eyes, but he buried it under that same smug tone. And where did you get this footage, Mr. Carter? Off YouTube. No, sir. I filed a public records request the day after Jamal's arrest. The courtroom murmured. Someone whispered he did his homework. Another said, that can't be right. But it was. Jalen stood straight, hands folded, not cocky, just composed. He didn't care about the whispers. He was watching the judge. Whitaker leaned forward now, less playful. Well, you're not completely clueless. But even if the search was questionable, the drugs were found in your cousin's car. That's a hard fact to ignore. Jalen was ready for that, too. The bag was under the passenger seat. Jamal was driving alone. No prints on the bag, no residue on his clothes, and no video showing him touching it. He didn't even know it was there. Whitaker didn't answer right away. He tapped his gavel lightly on the bench, thinking. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. This wasn't a punchline. This was a problem. And for the first time since Jalen walked into that courtroom, the judge's expression shifted, just a little, from smugness to irritation. He'd invited the kid into the ring, expecting a beatdown. But now it looked like Jalen Carter came to win. And Judge Whitaker wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. Jalen felt the weight of the courtroom's eyes on him, but it didn't faze him. He could almost feel the tension in the air, thick like fog. The murmurs, the whispers, the silent laughter that had started it all. It was all gone now. Everyone was watching. Judge Whitaker's face was hard, calculating. He glanced down at the papers in front of him, then back up at Jalen, still sizing him up like a predator trying to figure out if the prey was worth the chase. The room had grown unnaturally quiet. Mr. Carter, Whitaker finally said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. You presented some interesting points. I'll give you that. But we both know you're out of your depth here. Jalen didn't blink. He hadn't expected the judge to concede so easily. He was preparing for the long game. But this was the moment where Whitaker would either show his hand or fold. I may not have a degree, Your Honor, but I'm not out of my depth, Jalen replied, his voice calm but firm. I've read every page of this case, and I know this system better than most. You didn't expect me to fight back. But here I am. Whitaker's fingers tapped the edge of his gavel, a sign that his patience was running thin. Well, you might be good at reading case files, Mr. Carter, but I'm the one who makes the decisions here. And you're still not a lawyer. That was the moment. The subtle jab, the reminder that he wasn't real in their eyes. That was the moment Jalen knew he had to push back harder. I'm not a lawyer yet, Jalen said, stepping forward slightly. But I don't need a degree to see a setup when I'm looking at one. Your Honor, you've been the one stacking the deck against my cousin from the beginning. The fact that you think I'm out of my depth doesn't bother me. It just proves my point. Whitaker's eyes narrowed, his mouth tightening. The audience in the gallery could feel it now. This wasn't just about law anymore. This was personal. Enough, the judge snapped, his voice cutting through the tension. He slammed the gavel on the bench. We're not here for your grandstanding, Mr. Carter. If you want to represent this man, you'll do it the right way. Prove to me you know how this works. Jalen didn't flinch. He'd been waiting for this moment. I'll prove it. Right now. He turned back to the case file, flipping through the pages with practiced precision. Every page, every sentence, every detail was seared into his mind. He wasn't just fighting for Jamal anymore. This had become his fight, a fight against the system that would overlook him, ignore him, and crush him simply because of his age, his race, and his lack of a law degree. Jalen tapped the file and pointed directly at the page that held the key. Your Honor, this is where the problem lies, Jalen said, his finger landing on a document detailing the police officer's initial statements. They claimed to smell marijuana when they pulled Jamal over. But the body cam footage shows they didn't even attempt to search until after they had already made their decision. There was no cause to do so, Judge Whitaker's face darkened, but his voice didn't shake. Are you accusing the officers of lying? I'm saying they didn't follow the law, Jalen shot back. And without the search, there's no evidence against my cousin. The courtroom fell into silence again. Jalen could see Whitaker weighing his options. This was no longer about making Jalen look foolish. This was a full-blown battle of wits. And Jalen had him cornered. Whitaker leaned back in his chair, glancing over at the prosecution's table. The prosecutor, a graying man with a permanent scowl, exchanged a brief, tight-lipped look with the judge. It was clear they hadn't anticipated this fight. But there was one thing Jalen hadn't counted on. The judge wasn't ready to let his reputation slip so easily. You think you've got it all figured out? Whitaker sneered. You think you're some kind of genius? You're playing a game you don't understand. This isn't about facts, Mr. Carter. This is about power. And you have none. Jalen's heart raced. But his voice didn't waver. Power doesn't mean you're right, Your Honor, he said calmly. It just means you're louder. And I've got the facts. So if you want to continue the charade, we can. But I'll warn you, the truth isn't something you can hide from. Judge Whitaker's jaw tightened. This wasn't going the way he expected. Not by a long shot. Then prove it, Whitaker said, leaning forward, his gavel resting in his hand like a weapon. Jalen didn't hesitate. He was ready. He had the truth, and now it was time to make Whitaker and the system face it. The moment the judge slammed his gavel, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Every eye was locked on Jalen, waiting for him to slip, for him to show weakness. But Jalen didn't flinch. He had one goal, to expose the truth. You want to prove your case, Mr. Carter? Judge Whitaker asked, his voice sharp, but laced with a growing sense of doubt. Then do it. Show me why this court should believe a word you've said. Jalen straightened up, locking eyes with the judge. There was no turning back now. The room seemed to close in on him, the walls pressing forward, the weight of the system itself staring him down. But he was calm, focused, because Jalen Carter knew something the judge didn't. He wasn't just fighting for Jamal anymore. He was fighting for everyone who'd ever been silenced, overlooked, and ignored. He was fighting for justice. Jalen took a deep breath and nodded. I'll prove it, Your Honor. He picked up the next page in his binder and slid it across the table to the bailiff, who passed it up to the judge. This page was crucial. It was the missing link that could unravel everything. It was a report from the police department detailing a history of complaints about the arresting officers, complaints of racial profiling, excessive force, and harassment. The officers had been involved in previous controversial incidents, but nothing had ever been done about it. No investigations. No consequences. The judge flipped through the pages quickly, his face growing darker with each passing moment. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. Where did you get this? Whitaker asked, his voice shaking ever so slightly. It's public record, Jalen said, his voice steady. I did the legwork. It's all there. You just had to look. The judge was silent for a moment, his fingers gripping the edge of the bench. The room was thick with anticipation. Everyone could see it. The system wasn't just broken. It was rigged. Whitaker finally looked up, his expression shifting from annoyance to something darker. This is irrelevant, Mr. Carter. These are just complaints, not evidence in this case. Jalen didn't flinch. It's relevant because it shows a pattern. It shows that these officers have a history of racial bias. They didn't pull over my cousin because of suspicion. They did it because of who he is. The courtroom was dead silent. Jalen's words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Even the prosecutor had gone still. Whitaker's jaw clenched as he shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between the evidence in front of him and the rising tension in the room. I'll remind you, Mr. Carter, that this is not a trial about race. This is about the law, Whitaker said, trying to regain control of the situation. Jalen didn't let him off the hook. No, Your Honor. This is about the law and justice. And that's what's been denied to my cousin from the start. Whitaker opened his mouth, ready to respond, but before he could speak, something unexpected happened. A voice from the gallery interrupted. I'm tired of watching people like him get crushed by the system. The words rang out, sharp and defiant. Jalen turned toward the voice and saw a woman standing in the back of the courtroom. Her arms crossed, her eyes burning with the same passion Jalen felt deep in his bones. She was a local journalist, someone who'd been covering the police department's controversies for years. Jalen had seen her reports, but he didn't know she was here. She's right, the woman continued, her voice growing louder. This isn't just about this case. This is about every case where someone like Jamal is treated like a criminal before they've even committed a crime. You can hide behind the law, but it's not the law that's broken. It's the system. The courtroom was in chaos now. Some people were cheering, others were murmuring in shock, but Jalen's focus never wavered. He'd just been handed a powerful ally. Whitaker slammed his gavel again, trying to regain control. Order. Order in this court. But the damage was done. The floodgates had opened, and the truth was spilling out. The judge's smug demeanor had cracked, and now he was fighting to keep the facade of neutrality. "I don't need your speeches, Miss Hamilton," Whitaker said, his voice trembling with a mix of frustration and anger. "This is a court of law, not a soapbox." But Jalen wasn't finished. He had one more piece of the puzzle to reveal, the final nail in the coffin. "Your Honor," Jalen said, stepping forward one last time, "I'm not here to give speeches. I'm here to give you the truth. The evidence in this case doesn't just fall apart because of bad cops. It falls apart because it was never there to begin with." He turned to the jury. "This case was built on lies, on assumptions, on a system that wants to see my cousin guilty, no matter what. But you have the power to change that." Jalen's voice was unwavering. He had nothing to hide. No tricks. Just the truth. The jury looked at each other, then back at him. Their faces were unreadable, but the silence in the room spoke volumes. Whitaker's expression hardened, but Jalen knew something the judge didn't. The game was up, and it was only a matter of time before the truth won. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jury filed in, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. The room seemed to hold its breath, every eye fixed on the jury foreman as he approached the judge with the verdict.